everybody, I'm Nicole.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Sarah, and together we're the co-founders of Whale Tales, a living library of cetacean stories.
Today we are digging deep into dolphin memory.
Plus, a dolphin story that you don't want to miss.
So sit back and enjoy as we dive right in.
Hello. Hello, hello. Happy March. Spring is springing or fall is falling, depending on where you are. The seasons are changing. For this month's episode, we decided to do something a little bit different. We're trying it out. We would love your feedback because if you like it, we might do more. And if we don't hear anything, we might do more again because we like it. We're inviting you to Journal Club.
So, wow, what is Journal Club? Journal Club was something that I did a little bit in school, and I know my grad school friends, like my friends who went to grad school, did it even more, where it's, I think they probably all work a little bit differently. Either it's like every week one person picks an article and then brings it and talks about it, or everybody, what I did in like a seminar class that I had in my last year was like there would be like assigned reading of a journal every week, or usually more than one a week, and then we would like talk about it in different ways in our seminar. So that's kind of what we're gonna do.
Yeah. So this month, for Dolphin Awareness Month, we are going to read this super interesting article called Decades-Long Social Memory in Bottlenose Dolphins by Jason N. Bruck, published in 2013. And we're going to discuss its findings and our thoughts with each other and with you.
Hooray! We're very excited. Before we dig into the article itself, a little bit about the author and researcher. So as Linz mentioned, his name is Dr. Jason Bruck, and he is currently, from what I could find on the internet, the assistant professor of biology at the Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas, where he runs a cognition and communication and conservation lab focused primarily on dolphins, though he has done some research on a number of other cetaceans and even some other marine mammals and some other just mammals. I was going to say land mammals, but if they're not marine mammals, then they are land mammals.
They are land.
Probably. Maybe. No, my brain's going off. They're just mammals. On animals. Whee! You can find him on Twitter at Jason Bruck. I say that and we don't know him. So also maybe, it was pretty easy to find him, but we don't all need to go off as like a whole Whale Tales pod and like go all crazy on his Twitter. But he seems like a really fascinating researcher. He's published some really cool studies on dolphin, I guess the senses of dolphins. That's kind of one of the things that he seems to be focusing on, is how dolphins perceive their environment and the complex social systems they have. He's really interested in that. And I found there's a number of his research papers that are available entirely free online. A quick scan of his Twitter showed that he's really, really pro free access to science. Hooray, as are we listeners, which you've heard us talk about quite a lot. And I think one of the coolest projects that I could find in, a couple days search that he is working on is focused on how to design a drone that could actually fly into a dolphin's blind spot and collect samples from the mucus that is mixed with the water and the air sprayed out of their blowhole when they exhale.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I know they're doing it with whales, but that's easier.
Yes. Because slower and bigger.
Yeah.
The blowhole is a larger target. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. So this study came out, or was published in 2013, and it basically is trying to answer a question of how good or how long, how strong is the memory of bottlenose dolphins, specifically their social memory, which is their memory of each other. And conveniently, bottlenose dolphins have signature whistles, which we've talked about, like, I think every episode that we've done so far this year.
Yeah, this is a weird
which is funny.
Theme of the year.
Yeah, so they have these long lasting, like their signature whistles don't change very much throughout their life as far as we know. So they this study is trying to understand how well dolphins remember other dolphins that they've met over their lifetime. And it seems kind of bizarre, but there's a few reasons that you might want to, like, that dolphins might want to remember individuals, which would be things like knowing who they're related to avoid inbreeding. That's usually like the most obvious one, but also like who they have gotten along with well before and might want to like have some reciprocal hunting behaviors with. It would help to maintain social hierarchy in a complex social environment such as bottlenose dolphins. And so having a long-term social memory, if the study can prove how long it is, can then help to inform probably further studies about what they use that memory for. If you can assume that they have a long-term social memory, then you can assume things like when two groups of dolphins that haven't seen each other for years come together, they remember each other, and that can inform how you approach like other interactions.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially interesting with dolphins because they have it talks about a lot in the paper fish and fusion social system. So like small groups of individuals will come together and then break up into like different small groups like throughout their lifetimes and throughout the year, throughout the day even. So like they're coming together in different social groups, maybe for hunting alliances or reproduction or who knows what, coming together and breaking up in groups throughout their life. So Lindsay, do you want to talk a little bit about how they studied it? Because like when I was reading this, I was like, oh, how do you do that?
I know, right? That's where I got sucked in. So this experiment did take place in captivity over, it didn't actually say how many years, but
I don't know if the study took place over that long, but because they'd had the history of the social interactions over 20 years.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. So like took place in a number of different aquariums, including the Brookfield Zoo, Disney Animals, Science and Environment, Indianapolis Zoo, Minnesota Zoo, Texas State Aquarium, and Dolphin Quest Bermuda. So the reason I got confused about the years is because these dolphins have been moving in between these different places over different times. So they've had a multitude of different lengths of relationships, like less than a year. There's some calves in there, but also up to 40 years. And they've been apart, and then I thought that they came back together and then they did a study. I think that's where I got confused. They didn't come back together. They've just been apart.
Yeah.
But they have been together at some point. And so then what they did was there was 43 different animals, and they were from 4 months to 47 years. And the average time they were away was 6 years, and they have moved an average of 1.5 times in their lives between different facilities. So what they did was they used signature whistles. They have the whistles of the animals that they were in contact with, they had lived with in their lives, but also other dolphin whistles. So what they did was they started playing the non-known whistle, the unfamiliar whistle, and played it until the specific individual stopped responding. So it wasn't responding to a noise that was just happening. And then they played the familiar whistle to see if they responded to that whistle being different and being a familiar whistle. And then they took a break, and then they would do it again, either with a familiar whistle, and then they would switch to see if they reacted the same way when they did it again, but with an unfamiliar whistle. If that kind of makes sense. It makes sense in my brain, but it's kind of hard to...
The setup was confusing, but yeah, seems to make sense.
So the first test whistle, if it was familiar, then the second test whistle would be an unfamiliar, but it would be the same age and sex as the familiar, just to like root out any kind of other reasoning why they might be attracted to this specific call.
Yeah, that was one of the things I really appreciated. It was confusing to read about, but because also my brain is not in academia mindset
No.
at the moment, so it took a few times, but I was kind of taken back to like my critical thinking and my critical theory classes in my undergraduate degree, where you were supposed to pick apart the methodology of different studies. And I found when I kind of like applied that lens to my brain and reading this article, like he really did a thorough job of trying to, as much as you can in an enclosed environment like that, really trying to design a study that would remove as many of the sort of like other
options
that the animal might be interested in that sound as possible. And like in my mind really went above and beyond to try and show them the familiarity and the recognition as opposed to just novelty or interest, which we'll get into a little bit more in the results as well.
Yeah, so there was 4 different response levels that they marked. So it was head turned toward the speaker but no approach, approaching the speaker but 1 meter, maintained 1 meter proximity for less than 2 seconds, approaching the speaker and stayed for longer than 2 seconds, or made forceful contact with the gate trying to get to the speaker, or engaged in rapid swimming behavior. And all of these responses, if they were to be measured, they had to be done within the first 2 seconds of the playback. So that's kind of how they measured the responses.
Can I just say that in reading that part of the article, I now, because this was, like you said, it was, I mean, the study was published in 2013, so the research was probably done at least a year, if not a couple of years before that. And I was just imagining that if I was designing a study like this now, I would have different emojis to represent the 4 different
me too. Definitely.
levels of engagement. And the last one, the like forceful swimming, was like just like all exclamation points and the crazy excited face.
Yeah, just like, oh my god, it's my buddy. It's my friend. I haven't seen him in 40 years. Ah! Yeah, exactly. And then I didn't read this entire paragraph that was about the stats because I was like, no.
Yeah, no, we are not statisticians, but I mean, we'll get to Nicole will get to the summary of the statistical results,
but the methodology of the statistics, no, nobody needs to know that unless you really want to.
It's not a good audio content.
But there are graphs that you are welcome to look at if you want to look up the study. So ready to hear what the results were?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
It was both not surprising and also interesting to me to read the results. Yeah. So we'll get into it a little bit more. But for our listeners, here are sort of like the broad scope results. Overall, as you probably would expect, and was concurrent with his hypothesis, dolphins showed a higher response to familiar whistles than unfamiliar ones. Significantly higher response, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And what is really interesting about that is that when he broke it down, there was absolutely no effect of time on those response scores. So it could have been an animal, like the whistle that was a familiar whistle could have been an animal that they last saw a year ago, or it could have been an animal that they last saw 20 years ago. And that time difference, and you have to think about that as a percentage of this animal's life, not in human years. 20 years is a significant period of time in a Terciops life, a bottlenose dolphin's life. That's probably about 70% of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 75% maybe. But there was no effect of time kind of like decaying that recognition. That's crazy. We'll dig into that in a second because that's something I really want to get into. But some of the other things that were sort of like statistically significant or not that were interesting in the results is that the age of the dolphin that was responding to the whistle did have an impact on whether they were interested in the whistle, and notably whether they were interested in the whistle because it was familiar or not. So like you said, there were 3 different age categories. There were infants, juveniles, infants or calves, sorry, so a year young or younger is a calf, juveniles, and then adults, which is 6 and over. And the calves, the under-year-olds, were pretty weak at remembering any familiar whistle, which is not surprising. They are babies.
Not at all. Yeah.
And also, not as many whistles would be familiar to them.
But also, maybe it's because we're looking at the difference between their excitement about familiar whistles versus unfamiliar whistles. So maybe it's not that they don't remember familiar whistles, it's just that they're excited about any noise. Like they don't really care.
Totally what it was.
I feel that's what it was. Yeah.
Because they were like even more excited about the novel ones because they are babies and everything is new and exciting and awesome.
Yeah.
So
I wonder.
So it's harder to tease
also,
apart.
like, it's an interesting thing that I don't know if we'll ever be able to fully find out about, like, how this knowledge grows as you get older. Like, juvenile, like, calves don't need to know, like, oh, I can hang out with this guy because he's good for me to go get ladies with, or stuff like that. Like, they have less interactions in general, and, like, the imprinting of their mother is the most important.
Exactly.
But how much of it, like, how much imprinting do they have with, like, their kin and stuff? Like, is that important when they're less than a year? Does it?
Yeah. But
like,
also,
all of those kinds of things. Yeah.
Is it a skill that they need to practice?
Yeah.
So that they have it for when they need it. Because there's lots of things that babies do that they don't need to do.
Yeah, that's true. And then the other results, and these are kind of like nil results, as in that there wasn't a statistically significant finding on it, but that's what is interesting, that were really interesting to me, is that there were no significant effects of kinship, which is sort of like degree of relatedness. So they were equally as good at remembering the familiar whistles of animals they were not related to as animals that they were related to. And the sex of the caller, so the sex of the animal whose whistle they were listening to, didn't impact them. So it's not as though, you know, like potential for breeding or a potential to avoid inbreeding was impacting those results. They were just as good at recognizing opposite sex as same-sex whistles. And finally, this is the one that really gets to me because it also kind of goes back to like just how good they are at remembering the whistles. The amount of time that the animals spent together so that they were housed in the same facility didn't impact their ability to recall those whistles. So it could have been an animal that they were housed with for 6 months, or it could have been an animal they were housed with for a decade. And if the time between seeing each other was the same, there's no change in recognition. That short
cool.
version summary. Dolphins have way better memories, at least for this, than I do. I can't speak for all humans, but certainly me.
I was just going to say, like, first of all, they said in humans, the average time you remember a person is 40 years. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. But also, dolphins have bigger brains. But they also don't have most of their brain filled with Backstreet Boy lyrics. I think. I can't test that, but I know that that's what's in my brain.
If someone wants to give us money to do that study, though, I'm down.
Amazing. But also it mentions, so because I did say, like, at the beginning, their signature whistles really don't change over the course of their lifetime, whereas over 40 years, people do change. So if you saw somebody that looked exactly the same, I mean, first of all, you'd be a little weirded out because there was time travel, but like, you have to be more familiar with people, and also like they have to have expected aging processes, like not unexpected aging.
That's true.
For that to happen. So,
but it is crazy. I mean, we can dig into this a little bit more now, but as to the reasons why or why not this might be so strong in bottlenose dolphins, but it's crazy to me that they can basically remember the signature whistles of even an animal that they only met briefly for at least 75% of their life, if not up to 100% of their lifespan. Now, some of the you know, potentials for why that might be, and you know, some of the limitations of his study that he recognizes in the paper are, this was an entirely captive population study. So, you know, if you think about the number of humans that you have met in your life, it's exponentially to the like 100th power more than the number of dolphins that these dolphins have met. And
so it would be interesting. Like, I have no idea how you would do this study with dolphins in the wild. Like, that's one of the cool things about being able to do captive studies. But like, because wild dolphins, like once they're adults, would have met so many more individuals, it would be interesting to replicate with wild dolphins.
Yeah, I just don't know how.
Yeah, no, it's not possible. But if we could just magic power it, it would be cool.
Yeah, it would be really cool.
I think the other thing too is like, you know, and like this is like the difference in reaction. So like a strong reaction, like running into the speaker, versus like a minimal reaction of like, oh, okay, it's just a speaker. Like, that part I think is interesting too. Like, it's not that they aren't potentially interested in new dolphins, but I think, and yeah, we talked about this a bit with the calves, but like, it's just the strength of the reaction, or the severity of the reaction, even though severity is the wrong word. But yeah, like the way that they react is just statistically different when it's somebody or a call that they recognize, which is like, it's an interesting study. And like, that's something I remember from like behavioral classes in university. It was like, designing behavioral studies is so hard, because how do you like grade a reaction? And like, yeah, so
what if they just really didn't like that dolphin?
Exactly. And now,
yeah, there's that
now
too.
I'm like, but what if you, like, how different did they all, like, did each individual react the same way? Did they have reactions, like marked reactions to all of the calls or whatever, but did they have different reactions to calls that they had longer relationships with, or that they knew? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah.
Like, that's like a whole other level of study, but is even harder because you have to determine the behavior of the animal, and also like, and again, know if they had a positive relationship in general together. And
like, that would be the kind of study that you would do on like even fewer animals. So like, there's kind of two ways to go deeper on this. Like, obviously, like, to get more statistical significance, you would do it with even more individuals and more calls. But then also you could do it like a more in-depth, and like really analyze the behavior of specific individuals when exposed to the calls from other specific individuals that they know or don't know. It's kind of cool. Like
and then
the directions.
They'd have to do that multiple times to see if they reacted the same way, and like, and then that gets even like, that's again behavioral ecology. Like, what if they just felt blecky that day and didn't want to,
or they're like, I'm bored with your study now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I know that when I hear a noise, it's not a real dolphin.
Yeah, so. Exactly. I figured it out because I'm a dolphin and I'm smart. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that would, both of those studies would be hard to do, because it was very cool though.
But it's just one of those things of like, even bottlenose dolphins, like one of the best studied animals, especially in captivity in the world, and we just thought of 3 different new studies. 4 if you count Backstreet Boys.
Which is the one I'm most interested in conducting.
Me too.
The other thing that would be interesting would be to like, and this has been done, is like the other kinds of memory that dolphins have. So like, you know, people have studied like procedural memory. So like, they train them to do a certain like set of behaviors or something, and then come back years later and they still know how to do it. So I don't know. It's just neat, because then you could make like ecological, like social and ecological like guesses about how group structure is important and all that kind of stuff. Very cool.
So what did you guys think? Final thoughts on the article?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I didn't find, like, I found the result explanation really clear and easy to understand. I did not find how the study was conducted information very easy to understand at all, but it doesn't really matter in this case. The only reason that matters is if you're trying to like replicate the study, whereas I'm just trying to like understand what the gist of it is. So
yeah, I was interested because he talks about how, like you said, sex and kinship status doesn't affect the recognition and all sorts of social knowledge and stuff, and then he mentions some of the dolphins in Shark Bay, which is a different subspecies of dolphin. And I don't know, and like, it's one of those things I'm like, I don't know enough about the subspecies of dolphins, especially their behavioral ecology, but like, like, it's not like he's comparing and making big assumptions or something. He just mentions them and about their open social network, again, like with overlapping ranges of compromise of males and females, and like just some of the ways that dolphins live in Shark Bay, and then also Sarasota Bay, which I don't know what subspecies that is, but it's just one of those like interesting things.
I think that because this is so rare, it's such a rare behavior, and then also so rarely studied. Like you kind of like at least a subspecies is better than comparing them to like elephants.
Oh yeah, totally. So. It really just made me think about, again, subspecies, and like we know how different the ecotypes of killer whales are, and how different their social relationships are. And it's not like they haven't studied the social relationships of wild Atlantic bottlenose dolphins, and they have a ton of information about that as well. But it's just one of those things of like, I wonder if it's different. Yeah. Like, not that this is wrong. It's just like, there's another study for you. Yep. Again.
Yeah.
Of like, is it different? Studies. So yeah, just the thing that I thought about, especially because how much we've talked about the differences in even just the ecotypes here in BC of orcas, and how different their social relationships are with each other. But who knows what that has to do with their vocalizations, and what, we can't know. So I don't know. That was my thought. It was really well thought out.
It was very thoughty. It was a very thoughty thought. And we would love to hear your thoughts on this study, listeners, and also on Journal Club if you would like us to do this again every once in a while. We have included a link in the show notes to where you can find the complete article. Hooray for free access to science. And please let us know what you thought.
Before we continue with the rest of the episode, we do want to take a moment to tell you about how you can support our podcast and everything we do at Whale Tales.
One way you can support us is becoming a patron on our Patreon at patreon.com/whaletales. We have different levels of Patreon support. For $1 a month, you can join at the porpoise level. For $5 a month, you can join at the dolphin level. And for $10 a month, you can join at the whale level.
Yay! Each level comes with a variety of perks, including discounts on our merch, like our Whaley Great Day shirts and coffee mugs, which I needed this morning. You also get thank you postcards, access to extended interviews and stories with our guests, and you can produce your own Fun Flipper Fact segment of the pod.
We really want to thank all of our patrons for all of their continued support. You guys are truly amazing.
And if you aren't able to support us financially, that's totally fine. Totally get it. There's other things that you can do to help us out. You can leave us a rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice, like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This will help other people find the podcast. You can also tell your cetacean science and podcast loving friends about the podcast or about everything about Whale Tales so that they can listen and follow along too.
And then you can follow us on social media. Remember that our Instagram account was changed, thanks hackers, earlier this year. So if you were following us before, you can now find us at whaletales_org. If you don't remember if you changed your following, please go check. Because we know that a lot of people haven't noticed that we have changed our name. So please go check that. And you can send us your feedback so that we can keep making the podcast even better. It's time for Fun Flipper Fact. Woohoo! Today's Fun Flipper Fact is also about signature whistles.
Oh.
Because it's been on my mind since we have had it come up, whether purposefully or just because of listener questions, for every episode so far this year. And I started thinking, there are a lot of things in everyday life, certainly, but certainly in cetacean science as well, that we just take for granted that we know. And I thought that for today's Fun Flipper Fact, because we're talking about another researcher during the discussion piece and giving credit to his research, that it would be nice to recognize who actually discovered the signature whistles of bottlenose dolphins. Yeah. And how long have we known about them? Finding this information was hard. So it made me more determined and then more sort of like soapboxy to make this today's Fun Flipper Fact. So I will include a link to the article in which the sort of discovery of individual whistles, or what we now call signature whistles, was discovered. It is not, unfortunately, the whole article, because it was published 56 years ago. It is old. That is a long time. I did not expect that. I did not expect that we knew about Bottlenose Dolphin signature whistles for that long.
I would have maybe guessed, because that's the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Or wait, yeah.
65. 65.
Yeah. And because I know that we were studying dolphins in captivity in the 70s.
It was Caldwell and Caldwell. Melba C. Caldwell and David K. Caldwell were the two authors of the study called Individualized Whistle Contours in Bottlenose Dolphins, specifically Tursiops truncatus. And what was really interesting in what I could get access to of this article was that prior to 1965 and prior to the publication of this particular article by the Caldwells, research in bottlenose dolphin, which is what most of the cetacean research was at that time, because flipper, research into bottlenose dolphin communication was approaching it from that perspective that I think, when I was a kid and I started, I wrote in my little Lisa Frank diary, I'm going to learn to speak dolphin one day. Really did. Really believed that. Maybe one day. They were approaching the study of bottlenose dolphin communication from the perspective that this is grossly oversimplified, but let's say when a bottlenose dolphin goes, ee, that means fish. And when a bottlenose dolphin goes, that means let's get busy. So they were kind of approaching it from every repeated sound that we hear, regardless of which individual it comes from, means the same thing. And it was only after the publication of this study in 1965 by the Caldwells that they did a complete 180, the scientific community did a complete 180 in how they studied bottlenose dolphin communication, and as a result, sort of cetacean communication as a whole. So I found that really fascinating, that this one discovery of this one thing about this one species of cetacean really changed the focus of all communication research for decades moving forward. So whether that's right or wrong, I am not one to say, but credit where credit is due. Melba Caldwell and David Caldwell, you discovered something really awesome, and we have been discovering more and more and more about it for the past 56 years. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, if that's the case, then probably they had some impact on the people who discovered humpback songs and made the album and are responsible for saving humpbacks.
It's all interconnected.
So there you go. Fun flipper facted.
Now it's time for a whale tale. After all of that pondering, we have another story from our friend Kristen Powers, and this one about seeing dolphins. Whoa, what's the theme? Long and short-beaked common dolphins in San Diego.
If you heard my fin whale story a couple episodes ago, you'll know that I grew up whale watching off of Gloucester, Massachusetts. And in that time that I lived there and was whale watching, I never saw a wild dolphin, which was always a little disappointing to me because dolphins are awesome, right? So much to my surprise, when I moved here to San Diego, just about 6 years ago now, you could see wild dolphins from the beach. We have a local pod of coastal bottlenose, and how amazing was it to watch them surf? So I knew that I had to get out there. Now, it is the middle of COVID. It's July 5th, 2020, the day after Independence Day. My roommate and I head out on a private charter. They had just opened up outdoor activities again, masked, obviously, and we wanted to see something. It was starting into blue whale season. Coastal humpbacks were around. What were we going to see? And we had no idea that we might get skunked by the whales, but not the dolphins. Very shortly after pulling out of a very choppy Mission Bay channel, we see some churn on the horizon that isn't normal swell. And within 10 minutes, we are suddenly surrounded by a super megapod of long-beaked common dolphins. There were babies. They were riding the bow. Some of them were even vocalizing as they jumped out of the water. I was in utter glory. I had never experienced this. And on the entire 2.5 hour encounter, we must have seen every common dolphin in Southern California waters. Not just the longbeaks, but also short-beaked, who I'd also, again, never seen and never knew that they were so acrobatic and silly and crazy and just constantly leaping out of the water. I honestly don't think they know how to swim regularly because they are just entirely launching themselves out. It's wild. The best thing, though, was seeing the babies. Oh, these adorable little footballs. I could not even bear the giddiness of seeing these tiny little things, most of them still with fetal folds, and the joy that it brought me to see them so close. We had dolphins jumping so close to the boat that if I was a jerk, I could have reached my hand out and touched them. And I will never forget those moments of them just surrounding us, all of a sudden disappearing, feeding. There was a huge bait ball we saw on the fish finder on the boat, and then boom, everyone was up at the surface again. And that happened constantly. And I was just enamored. I've always loved dolphins. Unfortunately, I'd only ever really seen them in captivity. But their playfulness, their intuitiveness to not get hit by the boat, everything about them was just incredible, especially when I leaned over the bow and made eye contact. I swear my life changed in that moment. And every time I've gone out since then and have been able to see dolphins in the wild on a whale watch here, I look for that connection with them. It is life-changing, as I said. It really feels like you are connecting with the animal, that they see you, and I get choked up every time it happens because it is a very emotional experience for me. I am just so in love with these creatures, and it is so amazing to be able to get to spend time with them on the water and watch them naturally. I just, we love them. We love them all.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the great story.
So before we finish the podcast, it is spring in the Northern Hemisphere, and that calls to mind spring cleaning, and I need to clean my house because it's perpetually not, because I have children. Oh, I am feeling that today. Anyways, I love my kids. But they are messy, and one of the things that I have been trying to focus on so far this year is, I think all of us are always trying to do our best to kind of like lessen our footprint and to make sustainable choices in everything that we do. And one of the sort of New Year's resolutions I made for myself this year was that whenever I'm buying something, anything, that I'm going to buy online and not just run to the store with, because I don't go to the store basically ever. I wanted to try and see if there was made in Canada, and in particular made by Indigenous peoples, but definitely made in Canada version of the product that I wanted to buy. So it goes, like the rain boots that I had to get for my 3-year-old. And I was finishing up some glass cleaner, cleaning the windows, because all of a sudden it's sunny. And I noticed they were very dirty because peanut butter fingers.
Oh.
And it's this is the kind of like mentality that we always talk about when it's just, like being aware of your consumerism and aware of the choices you make. I've had that same glass cleaner that I pick up for whatever is like $3 at the grocery store. Gosh knows how many times. And so because I made this my New Year's resolution, I was just like, I wonder if there's an alternative. I wonder if there, I wanted to kind of slowly but surely move our house to reusable, refillable cleaning supplies. I have in the past tried to make my own cleaning supplies, and I don't know if it's my ability to make them or just the messes that my family makes, that sometimes I need something a little bit stronger. And so at least in Canada, I found a Canadian made reusable cleaning supplies company called Philo. It's made in Quebec. And I wanted to share them with you and any of our Canadian listeners, but also just kind of talk about if you are in the spring cleaning mindset, if you're tidying up, if you're looking to just, again, this is something I normally would never have thought of. And it did take me, a good 20 minutes of internet research to find, but I'm really glad that I did, because I was able to support a Canadian company, a French-Canadian company that has beautiful, beautiful reusable glass spray bottles. I have 2 of them now with silicone sleeves, so that my 3-year-old, actually, I've let him use it, and it has held up to that. It felt like really good quality glass with the silicone base, and then the little, dissolvable tabs, I guess, that you put, so you fill it up with your own water, and then you just put the dissolvable tab in. And this company also was no plastic at all in the shipping, so it came wrapped in that paper that instead of the air packs or the styrofoam packs, and the bag, I guess the little package that the dissolvable tab for the cleaning solution comes in is compostable. So that's called Philo. They are awesome. And I feel really proud to be able to talk to my kid and talk to my family about doing that, and the importance of trying to find sustainable alternatives, even for some really, really simple things that we take for granted. Do you guys have any cleaning on the brain?
I need to do the outside of my windows, because I usually can restrain myself from putting peanut butter on the insides of my windows.
That's good to know.
But the outsides are very polleny, and luckily I can get to my outside of most of my windows from my balcony. So they need a good clean this weekend. And I usually just use old rags. The first clean, I'll just use an old rag, or an old sock is actually really good for that, single socks, and just hot so a little bit soapy water, biodegradable soap, just to get all the gunk off. And then I have these really great cloths that are microfibery cloths that you just use with water on glass and mirrors and stuff, and it gets off probably again, it's not going to be sufficient for the outdoor pollen or the peanut butter, but it is sufficient for day to day, just getting smudges and stuff off of glass. So then I'll go through and get the streaks off from that, and that'll be good. And then I'll be able to see outside.
Mm-hmm. That's nice.
Seeing is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sunshine.
Well, I think that about brings us to the end of our episode. We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode or any episode, so please visit our website, whale-tales.org, and find links to our various social media handles so that you can drop us a line.
You can also tweet at us directly. I am FHG07. Sarah is Sarah K. Given, no H, and Nicole is Nick F. Can, CANN.
You can also head to our website. There you can subscribe to the podcast, check out our merchandise like mugs and shirts, learn about supporting us and becoming a patron, and read over 1,100 whale, dolphin, and porpoise stories.
That's whale-tales.org. Tales like the story, not tales like the animal.
And if you've seen a cetacean, we would love to add your story to our library. Click on the share link on our website, or contact us on social media. We're at whaleTales.org, or on Instagram we're at whaleTales_org, or you can email us a voice memo and tell us all about your incredible encounter.
Finally, we want to acknowledge that we recorded today's episode on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples and the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, as well as the homelands of the Tsawwassen First Nation.
Thank you again for listening and for supporting us, and we hope you all have a whaley great day. Bye!
Bye.